Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review of this little giant guy, the Giantmouse GM2. You may have remembered seeing the Giantmouse GM1 on my channel. This guy is a brand new release by the same company. They're the second model around. This is the GM2. You will note that there is also a GMP2, which has, instead of the carbon fiber, full-on titanium scales. It's also a good deal heavier and a little bit more expensive, so I went this route, but you may see those out there as well. This knife is also a limited edition sort of an affair. If you look in the inside here, hopefully you can see this, there is a number on this guy. This is number 278 out of, I think, 300. So these are going to sell out fairly quickly. If you want one, you may as well jump on one. Let's do a size comparison real quick. Right here is your Spyderco Delica, as always. So the blade here is a little bit bigger. Spyderco PM2 is closer in the vicinity, although the PM2 is slightly longer seaming at the very least. Right here is your Ontario Rat number 1. The sharpened part of the blade is very similar in overall length. And your Ontario Rat number 2, and well, since it's on my table, what the heck, here's a Chris Reeve Knives Large Shabazz in the Insingo blade shape. So there you go. Take my hand away during the size comparison. See, I'm learning. Anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this giant little mouse. So, on the good side, first off, they've learned some great lessons off of the GM1. First, it has a lot less pocket pecker. The flipper tab is much less prominent, which means this is not going to be as effectively pecking on whatever lives in your pocket during the day here. I like that very much, and it was kind of a problem for the GM1. Speaking of things in the pocket that were a problem, the GM1 had a fair amount. It was more of a leafy style blade, and as such, it was a little bit thicker. It protruded out, and so the GM1 always felt a little bit kind of wide in the pants in your pocket there. The Bowie blade actually allows this guy to ride a little bit lower, which gives it a much more, I'm not going to go ahead and say svelte, but it certainly feels a lot more narrow, which I appreciate very much. And then one of the biggest improvements is the blade steel. The GM1 had N690 steel, which is not great at this kind of a price range, but this has M390, which is absolutely a-okay, good to go, no problems. So that's good. Speaking of the blade, I like the blade shape on this guy actually a lot more than I expected to. Yeah, it's got a little bit of an upswept tip, and that bugs me a little bit, but it's a nicely done Bowie style blade. I mean, a point of comparison here is the Spyderco Sleek Bowie, and you can see here that this guy, the GM2, has a lot more of a flat section here and then a very sharp sweep over here, as opposed to the Sleek, which has a much more even belly. This sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, but this very abrupt tip is nice because it almost gives you a little bit of a Tonto-style surface that you can use for getting in there and scraping on something. If you've got like a sticker on the desk, this is going to be a little bit more effective than trying to come in from the side. I don't know, I like that a little bit, and so that's a nice blade shape. I appreciate it very much, even though I didn't think I was gonna. Another thing that I appreciate about this blade is that it is not terribly thick behind the edge. If we compared this to the GM1, I believe the GM1 was a little thicker behind the edge, but even relative to a lot of your other knives out there, this is pretty good for slicing. I appreciate that very much with this. This is also a very lightweight knife for its overall size. I mean, this is not a small knife particularly, but for what it is, it feels very light, because you've got all this carbon fiber on here. I mean, the construction is quite literally carbon fiber, backspacer blade, carbon fiber, and a clip. So for knives in similar weight classes, this guy in carbon fiber is a little bit lighter, and it just kind of feels very airy. It's not a very super heavy knife, and I kind of like that a lot. The ergonomics on this guy are also quite good, because in part of the contoured carbon fiber, this is not just a flat surface, unlike, for instance, on your ZT452CF here, where this is just flat. This is outright contoured, and then couple that with a nice finger choil. This is very nice in the hand. No complaints whatsoever there. Next thing I'll highlight is the floating lock bar construction. Maybe you can see this, maybe you can't, but there are no liners actually in this knife. I'll see if I can illuminate the subject here. There's no liners. There's just this one little piece of metal here, which kind of joins up with the back spacer in the back here to create a lock bar, basically. It's a little bit unusual. It's a little bit different. ZT does something kind of similar on the 0770 CF, but whatever it is, it's nicely implemented here. The lockup on this guy is absolutely 100% solid. I have absolutely no concern about the lockup here. You're looking at, maybe 10-15% lockup. It's nice, and it works very well. And it's a little bit unusual. The knife is almost all carbon fiber, except for this little thing in there. Then finally, I gotta point out the details, because this has got some good ones. One of them that I like is this little bit of extra cutout around the flipper tab area. So you can see that when you put your finger in here and you flip the knife, you fall into a slightly wider area, which just feels a little bit better on the fingers than falling into a narrow one. Similarly, on the blade here, the top of the blade is crowned nicely, but it's also got some jimping up here, and although my hands are a little small to take full advantage of it, it is nicely done, and the swedge on the blade here is very, very nice. It's got the pivot collar on both sides that's nicely anodized, something, kind of a darkish blue, same color as on the GM1, I believe. May even be the same pivot collar for that matter. It's got a nice clip, which I believe is the same clip from the GM1. The lock bar is engraved. You get some nice jimping on the back spacer that, integrates nicely and sits down below in there. The finger choil has actually got some rounding to it, which is a little bit unusual. They've taken the time to actually make sure that this is contoured, not just a flat surface. And like I said, the carbon fiber itself is rounded. There's a doming effect here to it, and that's a really nice thing, and it's a sign that they gave a damn. So there are some really nice details on this knife that make me see the strength of the designers. Vox and Enso were the designers on this guy, and so that's very nice. So that's your good. The nice details. The floating lock bar construction is well done here. The ergonomics are good. It feels very light for its size, even at 4 ounces. It's hard to even describe that feeling, but it's there. I like that it's relatively thin behind the edge. I like the blade shape more than I expected to, and they have learned some lessons and fixed some issues from the GM1. Now let's talk about what's great about this knife. So what's great about this is actually my interactions with the company in preparing this review. It's a little strange, but this seems like as good as any place to put it. As I was doing the review, I looked up their warranty policy, and it was ugly. You had 30 days of coverage, and that's it. It's a 30-day long warranty, and it was voided instantly by disassembly. Both of those things are wholly unacceptable, way uglier than the norm for a knife that costs $325. It kind of came across as, you know what, we don't want to deal with warranty claims, you're on your own. So I emailed the info line for clarification, just saying, is this really what this is? And I got an email back from Jim, the Mouse King, the CEO of the company, saying, yeah, that's what it is, but we try to take care of people, and I'll take care of you if there's any problems. And that was nice of him and whatnot, but I explained that was just a really deeply ugly warranty policy, and it felt really like, screw you guys, especially at this kind of a price point. We ended up having a pleasant, productive conversation on the matter, and it ended with him saying, you know what, let me see if we can make any changes to the warranty. I think his phrasing was to make it better reflect what we're trying to get across to people. The next day, I get an email from him saying, hey, check out on the warranty policy. And it is completely revised. It now has, and I quote, we stand behind our knives by guaranteeing against defects in materials and workmanship for the life of the product. There we go. That's a warranty. And in addition, although they recommend against disassembly, pretty much everybody does, they now go to it may void the warranty if you break it doing that. But it's not anymore, if you take it apart by warranty. And this is a fine thing for me. I'm okay with people saying, if you break it while you're disassembling it, that's on you. That's completely reasonable. But the people who say the mere fact that you disassembled the knife completely absolves us of anything, that's really ugly to me. And so this is a fine warranty. It's towards the front now. I mean, it's not the best warranty in the business, but it does need to be. And so they went from something that was really awful to something that was really great, quite literally overnight, on the basis of feedback from their customers. That's really great. It's good responsiveness, it's good integrity, and honestly, it impressed the heck out of me. And so to me, that's a really beautiful thing. Not only that this knife now has a good warranty, but it seems to have a real human at the helm who really does want his customers to be happy. Whether I can attribute that to the knife or not, I don't know, but I am impressed with Giantmouse knives as a result of that little exchange, and so there you go. Let's talk about what's bad. If you need something about the knife, what's great here is probably going to be the ergonomics. Just saying. Moving on, let's talk about the bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, I'm not a big fan of the choice to use a fulfillment center directly from the company rather than to go through distributors like your Knife Center, Blade HQ, Knife Ship Free. First off, it removes our ability to support the distributors who treat us well, which I think is a really important thing to do as a community, but also it completely prevents the idea of a return. Many distributors have different policies on that, but at least you can do an exchange if something just doesn't fit your hand. This doesn't give you that choice. You're basically doing an as-is, all sales final sorts of shtick, and that's not as satisfying at this kind of a price point. Next issue for me, little thing, but does bug me a bit, is that there's no smooth area underneath the clip. I kind of wish that they had dropped the carbon fiber texture right here so that every time you put it in your pocket, you're not doing a... and then... because that's just going to be a little hot in the pocket and not all that pleasant, to be completely honest with you here. Next thing for me that bugs me a bit is the thickness of the blade. The blade just feels thicker than it needs to be here. Relative to the Sleesh Bowie, it's a good deal thicker. This is closer in thickness to the PM2, and I think maybe a little bit thicker. And that's honestly not stellar here. This is a fine slicer. It's thin enough behind the edge. It's tall enough that you can get away with it, but I think this would be more compelling both in the slicing department as well as just in the carry department, because a big part of the thickness of this knife is the blade stock itself and the backspace that accommodates it. If this blade were made thinner, this knife would be made thinner, and that would really be a beautiful thing. It's something that I find myself frustrated by a little bit, especially because, honestly, to me, this feels like a little bit more giant than mouse. It's not a huge knife by any stretch, but it feels rather large. It's larger in the hand. It's not a small knife, and that bugs me just a little bit. And so if they were able to knock down that blade thickness a little bit, it would make the knife a little thinner and thus carry a little nicer. Not a huge deal, but that bugs me. On the huger deal, there are some quality control issues here on this knife particularly. The carbon fiber on this guy feels rougher and more splintery, that's not a term, but nonetheless, than any other carbon fiber I've dealt with. Normally, carbon fiber is sanded down in such a way that it becomes a fairly smooth surface, like on your Spyderco Rubicon or this ZT, or even where it's a textured carbon fiber, kind of along these lines, like for instance on your Shirogorov Hati or your Southern Grind Spider Monkey, you end up with a very smooth texturing surface. The surface is still kind of polished. On this guy, though, there were areas where if I just drag my finger across it, it kind of reaches up and grabs, like there were little cuts, little splintery, rough tool chatter kind of feelings on it, and it's all over the handle, to the extent where if you take this out of your pocket, you actually see little bits of lint stuck inside there. And that's honestly a little bit ugly. I don't like the idea of carbon fiber splinters, and well, sanding carbon fiber is very dangerous. It's not something you should do without the proper equipment. So, I really wish that they'd done a better job on the carbon fiber there, and given that so much of this knife is that carbon fiber, it leaves me feeling cold. The other thing I'll say, and it's not a huge deal, but this came with a fairly substantial burr on the blade. I get the impression that whoever was sharpening it just forgot that last pass. So, they set it down to go to lunch. Pardon me. And when they came back, they just, oh, okay, throw it in the box. It's not a huge deal. I was able to repair it with just, a minute or two with a ceramic rod and then a bit of stropping back and forth. But that struck me as a little bit of like, I wonder if they quality controlled this one. So, I don't know. Not a big fan of those QC faults. And especially given that they're making 300 of these, you'd think that they could take a chance to look at every one of them. The next thing that is a big issue for a lot of people, although I did better than most, is that the detent on this knife is not great. As a flicking knife, it is spectacular. This, in fact, knife is really, really fun to flick. If you are a finger flicking guy, you are going to love the action on this knife. It's really well dialed in for that. But if you are a flipper guy, this is going to be somewhat less satisfying. It works okay, and I've got a better detent, I think, than many. But the detent on this guy is definitely a little bit soft. Cleaning it out, doing the disassembly, definitely helped, and it's wearing in some of the friction's going down, so it's better. But light switch style flipping is not necessarily very reliable. I mean, you can do it, but it sometimes will fail to lock up. So I'm not a huge fan of the detent. I mean, mine is okay, but it's on that bottom edge of okay, and I'm hearing from some other users that it's flat out not good. And I've heard very much that this is a problem with their manufacturer, Viper Knives. It's kind of a common issue, and so it's just inherited here. And to be honest, with the detent as it is on mine, this would actually be a slightly better knife without the flipper tab. If they ground that off, this would be a very compelling flick open sort of knife. Also with the thumb as well. So I wish the detent were really well done, because it really isn't here. And then finally on the bad side, the price on this guy is $325, and I'll be real, that feels a little bit high. Don't get me wrong, I mean, it's not completely out of line. It's got some nice detail, it's using some decent materials, and $10 of the price goes to saving kids. So, can't argue with that particularly, but this is a price, to sell this knife for $325, you need to make the knife kind of damn near perfect. This is it's pricey, but look how damn well we did it. That was totally the case with the GM1, but here, I'm not quite so sure. I feel like they dropped the ball a little bit on the quality, at least at the factory. And so, for me, this price is okay. I don't feel like, oh my god, you ripped my face off. But I'm just not in love at that price. I really think that this should be coming in at like $275, $250, how it's been made here. So, anyways, that's the bad part about this guy. The price is a little high. The detent is just not very good for flipping, although it's spectacular if you like the flick. You've got some quality control issues in the carbon fiber and in the sharpening there. It feels a bit larger than I feel like it needs to be, as well as a bit thicker because of the big blade stock. There's no smooth area under the clip here, and I'm not a huge fan of their distribution model. I feel like that adds a lot of disadvantages for users without a whole lot of benefit to us. So, there you go. Let's talk a little bit about the ugly here. The ugly thing for me is that this guy feels a bit like a step down in quality and overall mastery relative to the Giantmouse GM1, which was their first outing. I mean, don't get me wrong, the M390 is a big upgrade here, but the GM1 had this incredible action, both as a flipper tap knife and as a flicker. It also had just perfect fit and finish. There were no concerns whatsoever, and honestly, it just felt masterful. Like the GM1 was like, holy crap, this is how knife making should be done. Even if there were parts of the design I didn't love, I still respected every damn bit of it. It was really, really well done, and it blew me away. Unfortunately, this little guy is kind of lacking that feeling of mastery. I imagine that had these fit and finish issues not been present, I'd feel a lot more like that, but unfortunately, whatever it is, the factory just didn't step up to the plate. Maybe they're using a different factory, and maybe, a tequila factory moved in next door and the vapors got a little heavy in there. I don't know. I'm not here to speculate, but whatever changed between the GM1 and the GM2 in terms of production, in terms of quality, I really hope they figure out what it was and they fix it. And that the GM3 goes back to the original standards, because the GM1 was just like I am buying the next thing Giantmouse makes, and the GM2 leaves me feeling like, you know what? Maybe I should wait for the reviews for the GM3, which is sad because I'm the one doing the reviews. But anyways, that's the ugly thing to me, is I know that they can do so much better than they did, and this isn't bad. But I saw perfection out of these people, and then they slip back a little bit, and it's just really frustrating. So that's the ugly. It just feels like a bit of a step backwards after a really strong showing. But there you go. Let's do final conclusion here. My final conclusion here is honestly a little bit torn. I mean, this is, in its own right, a very, very nice knife. It is beautifully designed. Voxenonso did a great job here. There are lots of really nice little details. It's got a good overall shape. It feels great in the hand. It's a good cutting tool, which is a nice thing to talk about here. Great steel. I mean, the concept here is a beautiful thing. And although the execution is not really ideal, I mean, the carbon fiber thing, that's not so pleasant, and the detent is borderline ugly, especially some of the ones other people have had. They'd seriously been let down by that. But, it is still a fine knife, and in many ways, I think my review is maybe a little bit more harsh than it deserves to be. This knife is kind of like, the younger sibling of somebody who's had massive success, like Bill Gates' younger brother. The GM1 was so damn good that it set the bar super high. If I was just reviewing another knife by another company, this would probably be you know what, this is a great knife. They've got some issues, but it's pretty damn good. But seeing what was in the GM1 and then seeing what wasn't in the GM2, it's just like, it makes it a little bit tougher to not be disappointed by it. And so, I mean, that's kind of where I land. This is a great knife in a lot of ways. It's a very nice knife in its own right, and it's absolutely good to go for everyday carry. If you love the design here, and particularly if you like the finger flick over using the flipper tab, this is spectacular, because that gets rid of the biggest issue this knife has from the factory. And so if you want a lightweight, not terribly metallic everyday carry option, it's a good knife with a good warranty, this is a good place to go, absolutely 100%. But as a reviewer, having seen its older brother, I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed. I hope very much that they figure out what went wrong at the factory over there, or they switch factories altogether, and with the GM3 follow up with something that's a hit out of the park rather than a pretty solid infield fly. So there you go. I hope this has been interesting for you, that you have yourselves, well, I guess that you have yourself an absolutely wonderful day. Didn't have a really bad pun here. Sorry about that. Anyways, have a good one. Bye now.